Started by getting some of the legal stuff out of the way. So, Smartsheet is a publicly traded company. Any forward looking statements are not guarantees of any future performance, and you should not put undue reliance on any of those statements. And again, welcome to our Managing Projects at Scale with PPM showcase by Smartsheet. I know that is a mouthful. Just in an effort to make sure that we cover all questions during our session, please feel free to ask questions as they come up through this Q&A button here. I have an awesome colleague here on my end that will be monitoring questions throughout the presentation, and we'll also be recording today's session for any members of your team that maybe were not able to attend live. And then we'll also address any questions we weren't able to cover at the end with some Q&A time there as well. So we'll have plenty of time. All right, so just to help structure our session, here's a breakdown of what you can expect during our time together today. So we'll start off with some quick introductions around our team on the call and then what PPM means. And then the bulk of our time will be used for the product demonstration, so about 30 to 35 minutes. And then we'll wrap up again with that Q&A. All right. So my name is Miriam. I'm part of the Commercial Solutions Engineering team here at Smartsheet. Happy to be going through this session with you all. I'll be the one taking you through the presentation today, and you can think of my role as a technical resource to help customers like yourself identify what your business challenges are, and then also identify the ways in which Smartsheet can help you solve those problems. I'm also joined by my colleague, Alan. He has the same exact role as I do, and he'll be the one who will answer those questions as they flow in throughout the session. All right, and before we jump into the product demonstration, we have a few background slides to get through, with the first one being around why projects fail, which I know we're starting off a little bit dark, but what are those kind of challenges our customers come to Smartsheet to try and solve? So from either large corporations to small businesses, there's some pretty common themes that we do hear from our customers. So what can result in projects feeling like a failure? Maybe everyone is using their own tools, so there's tons of different kinds of silos. Maybe it's a lack of having a streamlined process or the ability to see everything in one place. All of this can lead to wasted time and not being able to either zoom in or zoom out to look at that big picture or our broader goals. So once we know what our potential challenges are, that next step is to understand how we can get you to that path of success. So Smartsheet as a platform is designed to streamline the way that you're managing your work to help you surface information so that you can make those accurate and quick decisions on the fly. All right, so let's talk specifically about PPM, or projects and portfolio management. What we're going to look at today is more of an end-to-end solution for PPM, and many of you may already be doing some of this, so let's just talk about what it means. So PPM is a set of processes that allows organizations to align individual work deliverables with higher level strategic goals. In other words, as mentioned below, it's doing what matters the most and then connecting the dots between strategy and that actual execution. And when it comes to PPM, let's just take a look at it in the lens of Smartsheet and what Smartsheet is for PPM. So we as Smartsheet think about PPM in the context of 6 domains. I know I have 4 up here. I'm intentionally focusing on these 4 first because these are the 4 domains that make up our execution phase. And you really have to have strong processes around these 4 domains in order to be able to tackle the other 2. So taking a look at that first domain here, that's around our demand intake. So basically, how do we receive work for our teams and how do we know what work we need to take on? And it's important to have a very streamlined way to capture new work so that we can minimize that back and forth and instead quickly take action on it. Then that next step in the process is prioritizing that upcoming work. So this can help at least have that conversation around maybe what's in the pipeline and what are those factors that we want to keep in mind when we're deciding which of that work to do first. And then once we do that prioritization and we've picked the most important projects to kick off, we then need to look at sourcing and planning. So this allows you to essentially look ahead at your team's capacity, see what people are available to take on work so that you can set those realistic targets for when that work can actually get started. And then once we have those projects sourced, meaning that work is assigned, we'll then get into this fourth domain, which is execution. And execution really is the most flexible part of the Smartsheet platform because it enables users to work how they want to work in the way that's most comfortable for them. So essentially, we can accommodate a traditional waterfall, we can accommodate agile, hybrid. There's lots of flexibility there to work in the way that you like to work. Then once we have this information that we need across these four domains and we feel, confident across them, we can then start to look at portfolio reporting. So portfolio reporting is going to take all of the information that we've already talked about and then roll it up into a centralized view so that we can start to make actionable data-driven decisions on that information. This is a lot of what we see when it comes to our customers and what they're initially missing is that portfolio roll up. And then lastly, completing those six domains I mentioned earlier, we have strategic planning. So this is looking at your portfolio and figuring out how aligned that portfolio is across your different kinds of strategic goals. And once we have these domains in place, a final layer to wrap around our process is around scalability and autonomy. And what this means is, as a portfolio leader, I can set the standards for my portfolio to be sure that everyone in the organization is following the same process and leveraging the same tools, but still allowing for autonomy of how that work gets executed. And this is where Control Center plays a really important role here. And then before moving on, I also did want to call out that we have a ton of different integrations here as well to kind of keep everything connected and bring everything into our centralized hub. So these are just a few examples of the integrations that we work with. For example, bringing in Salesforce information. Jira is another really big one. Slack, ServiceNow. So we definitely play nice with other systems as well. And the goal there is to be able to work and communicate wherever else we need to, while then bringing that information in and keeping everything connected. All right, and then one more background slide. So just briefly talking about Control Center so we can get some familiarity around that as well. So the short version is that Control Center is an automation engine that's designed to help organizations manage work at scale. And it does this by allowing us to replicate a standard set of objects that you would need for a particular project or process. Then it automatically keeps that information connected across the board. So from essentially where that work is beginning in the intake process to where it's being executed, and then feeding that into real-time portfolio level reporting so that we can get a precise view into trends, maybe bottlenecks, and progress going on in the portfolio of work. So with all of that being said, Control Center is a critical element of a PPM solution. And it's good to call out that Control Center can be leveraged without necessarily having to tackle all of those boxes that we saw on the previous screen. So depending on where we're at with like size and maturity, it's super flexible to work in the way that we would need it to, as long as getting it standardized and getting that work done efficiently. I also like to call out one more thing, and it's that we're not only limited to projects, we just use that as a standard term, but we do see tons and tons of use cases for Control Center as well. So some of those use cases being new hire onboarding, managing events, marketing campaigns, maybe clinical trials, whatever the case is, we see it all, essentially on a day-to-day basis. So there's tons of flexibility there. All right, so now that we do have that background there, let's talk about what we're going to cover in our demonstration with this roadmap. So we'll kick it off with demand intake and prioritization first. Again, really understanding what work is coming in and then focusing on what matters the most for that work. Then we'll dive into project sourcing and planning. So how do we align work, execution, and staffing essentially all in one place? Next, we'll move into standardized work execution. So how do we start to take that work, scale it, and automate it so that we can work and execute more efficiently? And then we'll finally wrap it up with rolling all of that work and data into portfolio reporting. So ensuring that we're making those informed decisions for not only like active work, but also future projects as well. All right, with that being said, let's jump into our demonstration here. So again, we're going to kick things off with our demand intake process. I'm going to take on the role of a project requester and where I would essentially go to make those requests as we're continuing to scale and add on projects for our organization. So this is essentially where I would go as a requester when I want to streamline incoming work and project requests. It's essentially this dashboard right here. So this is where that consistency is going to begin, where we're going to capture all of the right and critical information for our work. And we can do this in a couple of different ways, and I'll speak to it. So to kind of orient us to this screen, let's say that as a requester, I can come in here, maybe see some quick metrics around how the team is faring in terms of handling these work requests. I can also come into this designated workspace and submit a new project on the left-hand side here, in which we have a form, which is a very popular way to collect information from the get-go. And this Smartsheet form is a really great way for us to tell our team members specifically what we would need in order to get a project started. So as I fill out this information and I submit it as a response, it's going to flow directly into our intake sheet here, where my submitted information is going to create this brand new row for us. And each of these new rows will indicate an individual project. And then from here, I can use the magic of Smartsheet automations to set notifications for people so that work doesn't get missed every single time that a new project is being added to the sheet. And to give an example of what a prior process could look like, we hear very often from customers that before they take on a process like this, is having requesters instead sending an email with a couple of things that they thought that the project approver would need in order to get the project started, but they've actually missed like 5 or 6 important key points necessary to get that project approved. And as you can imagine, that's going to cause a lot of delays with that extra back and forth with emails. So just having a dedicated workflow like this is something that we're recommending in order to eliminate all of those, additional manual steps in the process. And then bringing our attention to the right-hand side here. So as a requester, I can also now have visibility into my previously submitted project requests. So in a world where we would want to give transparency to the requesters, this is going to help us reduce status inquiries and then again, reduce that back and forth because I no longer have to track down the approval status, where we're at with the project. It's all in this specific view for me. And one last call out I'll make here is if you don't want to use a form for your intake, there are definitely a couple of other ways that we can utilize an intake process as well. So, for example, if your intake information needs to come from, let's say, Salesforce, we do have an out-of-the-box Salesforce connector that can take that information and automatically create a brand new row for us directly in our intake sheet every time. So, just another way to streamline our intake process. All right. And now that we've taken a look at this first step in the process, where we can submit this new work and have a designated workspace for intake, we can then also help you manage a prioritization model to understand which of those projects that are submitted would be, the most important to kick off first. And before I move on to that next stage there, just again, as a reminder, feel free to ask your questions in the chat. And my wonderful colleague, Ellen, will be able to address those as we go. And then I'll kind of check in between each chapter and see if there's anything that we would need to address live. So we've seen prioritization captured in a few different ways depending on the customer's preference, but priority could be identified maybe simply through a symbol. So is it a high, is it a medium, or a low priority as a project? We could also set up some sort of scoring method. So I'll be able to kind of show that to us in our prioritization dashboard here. And just to mention, we do love our dashboards here. So you're going to see them as a theme as we go throughout each of our chapters. But this is our prioritization dashboard. And at first glance, let's say that I'm June, so I'm taking on our prioritization initiative. I can come here and immediately see how many projects we have in the pipeline for each priority category. So I can see that I have 3 projects that are high priority in the pipeline that we should be really taking a look at to kick off first. And then taking a look at this pipeline report. So this is actually going to give me the same information from our project intake sheet. However, it's organized slightly differently to give us precise visibility into the data that we need to understand for the scenario. So not only are we seeing, the name of the project, with a high, medium, low priority, I'm also grouping the projects by certain criteria, such as what strategic goal that project is aligned with. So however you want to kind of slice and dice that information, that's really where a lot of that power of our reports shine as well. Then if we take a look at the right-hand side, so I have this scoring model. So is this project that's in our pipeline, how does it align with our company goals on a scale of 1 to 10? What's maybe the revenue potential? Is it a higher or lower risk as we're scoring it? And then as I enter values from a drop down, from 1 to 10 for each of these criteria that we set, Smartsheet can then calculate this weighted total score here. And as we're calculating that weighted total, it's then going to rank that for us from highest to low priority so we can make really easy decision making on what projects are the most important for us. To take a look at another way that prioritization can happen on more of a simple term, I'm also going to take us into our project intake sheet here. So we were just here, but this is another resource that we can use in some of our prioritization meetings to have those kind of meaningful conversations. So for example, I could take a look at this information in our card view and look at our projects in different kinds of swim lanes, such as priority here. So we can kind of drag and drop this information as we're talking through it. We can make changes within this view. And then there's also tons of different kinds of categories that we can slice and dice this information, just so we can kind of start thinking about the big picture in terms of what we're prioritizing and kicking off first. All right, so once we've understood which initiative or project that we do want to kick off based on that new visibility we have in this prioritization workspace, we also do want to take a look at resource availability as well, just so we can make sure that the proposed dates for the start of this project that we've decided is really high priority actually aligns with the resources that we need available to complete that work successfully. And before I hop into that resource sourcing and planning chapter, Alan, are there any questions by chance that we need to address or cover live before moving forward?
No questions asked yet.
Perfect. All right. Right. So moving on to that sourcing and planning for our projects. So once we have that project that we have identified that we want to kick off, I'm going to take us into a workspace where we'll see Smartsheet's resource management tool embedded into our dashboards for easy viewing and access of our resources. And so let's say that I'm taking on the role of a resource manager or someone who just needs to understand the capacity and the availability of our team to take on that high priority project. So when I get into this designated workspace, at the highest level here, I can understand from either maybe a monthly or a weekly basis what the capacity of my different kinds of departments or roles are going to look like. So we can immediately see that our design team here is looking pretty bogged down in the next couple of months. So from this view, I'm going to drill down and see what's going on and what's, filling up their plate so much. So I'll be going into our allocation heat map. And so this view is that allocation heat map. So at a quick first glance view, it's letting me know where those over allocated areas of work are with the bright red. So we can immediately see that Harry and Hilda have a very busy May coming up. And now that we understand that, we can work to alleviate some of that from having this kind of new gained level of visibility. And then if I were to click my assignment details here on the left, I can also see who on our design team is working on what and who may be available to take on work. So we can get a full picture as this view is going to show me all of my projects, maybe some non-project work, so some kind of light admin work, and then any kind of upcoming leave for my team as well. Now, granted, right now we're only looking at the design team, but if I wanted to, I could also open this across everyone in our organization or switch really easily to different kinds of departments as well. Now, one thing that does come up often prior to and throughout a project is the need to track and address resource demand. So having work that needs to be done, but not, knowing just yet who to place in for that work. So we have generic resources that we call placeholders that can be used for just that. For example, I can see that here we need a design team member based on this generic placeholder for the project Blue Anidia for this specific time period. So I'm going to open the project sheet just to kind of show you what that placeholder looks like in there as well. So this is our project plan. It might look a little bit different from what your organization looks like, but this is where we would actually go to execute on the work. And we can see that that project manager has indicated that they need a design team member throughout this placeholder in the assigned column here. So we're just going to go back into the resource management tool and show you that sync of information back and forth when we go to assign a resource for this task, just to kind of speak to the bidirectional sync of it. So back here as a resource manager, I'm going to look through my design team. I can really quickly see that Shirley is available to take on this task here. So go ahead and assign it back to Shirley. I also do want to call out that we can set up people filters. So even as far as customizable ones. So for example, if I scroll down here, we can see there's some filters that we can set to help drill down and find the right person to take on work. Maybe it's through certification. Maybe it's a specific license. Maybe it's previous clients that they've worked with that we would want to drill down, or their location. So the options are pretty limitless here. If I go back to my project plan, we'll be able to see in just a moment here that Shirley's been added to our project plan sheet. And once again, we can set up automated notifications for her so that she knows that she's taking on this project without us having to manually email or message her to let her know. And one final note, it's obviously popped up here for us to take a look at, is our resource management panel on the right. So this is how we connect our project plans to resource management with a really quick and easy click of a button. And our project managers will always have a window into what's going on in that heat map we saw, since there is a mini version in the panel. So if we're making changes to an assignment within our sheet here, since it is a bidirectional sync, we'll know how it's going to impact the team without having to necessarily go back and forth with resource management. All right. And then scrolling down here, I also did want to mention that resource management has some useful analytics and reports as well. So as someone who's coming into this dashboard, who's responsible for staffing, this is going to tell me if my team does have the bandwidth to take on work within the next, let's say, for example, 3 months. So this is just showing us our different teams, but we could even add a team member as a secondary grouping to see who all is available within each of those teams. So for example, this is just showing me that we have options. And once we're further into planning out the details of our work, we'll be able to assign out that work to those specific people based on their availability. All right, so what we just saw is resource management and Smartsheet and how they can kind of work in tandem to plan and successfully manage those project assignments. And so using that process we just saw really make sure that we're aligning work execution and staffing. Now, if I do want to have a deeper dive into a resource management tool, I also do want to call out that we have a separate showcase for that. That's usually scheduled on a regular basis as well. Quick check in here, Alan. Any questions we need to cover outside of the chat?
We have a couple of questions coming in regards to resource, how resource analytics are calculated in the back end. So I'm typing those up to Karen right now.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, so next, let's just take a look at project and work execution. So we're going to take a look at Control Center here, where we're essentially going to be looking at templatizing a set of assets within Smartsheet and automating all of that manual and repetitive work. So for example, having an automation engine be able to go ahead and create this project dashboard and all of those underlying sheets and all of those reports tied to this project for us once we have it approved and ready for kickoff. So when we do this, we might start taking a look at things like a project plan, for example, a project level dashboard like the one that we're looking at here. And we're able to essentially templatize this and achieve a level of consistency in our projects by standardizing those exact assets, and then also really eliminating any kind of risk for duplicate entry of projects by automating that process as well. So we'll go ahead and take a look under the hood of Control Center. In reality, the provisioning of these new projects, such as this one, can really be done automatically with just a click of a button, such as pressing, let's say, approved in your intake sheet. So it can stay really simple, but just kind of for the sake of the demonstration, I'm going to take you through the process in the back end, just because I think it's going to really help to connect the dots on how Control Center works and what it actually does. So we're going to open up to Control Center here. And I like to call out that Control Center acts like a separate login from Core Smartsheet, just to mention that you don't need to have every single team member at your organization knowing that Control Center exists. It definitely is something that you can have only certain roles really utilizing and accessing this. So this is our landing page in Control Center. And so at first glance, it's giving me a view into all of the projects I have provisioned through this automation engine, and then some key details around them. So what we want to do here is create a project. So when we click to create a project here, we're going to be brought to a page around our blueprints, and Control Center can be made up of different blueprints. And to explain this, a blueprint is essentially a collection of sheets, reports, dashboards, any of those assets that you would need every single time that you're kicking off a project or any kind of work essentially to keep that consistency. So for example, here we have two different types of blueprints that we can choose from in this scenario, where maybe this initial level is more of a simple toolkit with less assets. And then this define level blueprint has more assets that need to be provisioned for certain projects based on like a heavier level of reporting and metric needs. So let's go ahead and create a initial level blueprint. And when we go to our template or our blueprint, we're going to see all of those required assets that are associated with this particular level of work here. So we have our sheets, we have some reports, we have a dashboard. All of these are going to be unique to your organization. So you'll work with someone from our team and they'll be able to help build out these specific sheets, reports, and dashboards in order for your team to effectively get those projects done. So it's unique to yourself. And then in addition to those required templates we also have the option of adding in some optional templates. So let's say, for example, you need a specific kind of report, maybe about 50% of the time for this type of project. So you don't need to have it provisioned for every single one of them. That's something where you can come in and add that as needed instead of just throwing it in ad hoc every single time. All right, so on this screen, we're going to actually decide which project we want to kick off and provision. So based on the critical information we submitted through our intake sheet, Control Center is going to automatically place that information into the profile data within all of those projects' assets without us having to manually do it. So for example, let's say we want to provision a simple project and then also one from the finance department. So based on that criteria, it's going to pull all the projects within finance that are simple, so a type of project, and are approved and ready to kick off. So we'll go ahead and select Bosco and Sons. And again, you can see that it's automatically filled out information based on that specific project. So that's where all that profile data is going to come into play, anywhere within all 9 of those assets within the template. And all of this, again, is going to be unique to your organization so that you'll have all custom fields for your profile data. And then on this last page, we can also choose how we're sharing this information out. So I'm the owner here. I can designate admins and editors and viewers. So you can templatize this information so that if you have specific teams that you want working on all of these types of projects, they'll be able to be shared essentially automatically so that you don't have to go in and do that every single time. And then once I go ahead and press connect, so Control Center is kind of like a guided interface. So it's going to go ahead and let you know what it's doing as it's creating all of those assets within the project portfolio. So while it's doing that, I do also want to mention that once this specific project has been created, it's never going to let that specific project be created again. So if I go in and I am templatizing this project and making it be provisioned, Alan cannot go in and provision this same exact project at the same time. So we have some guardrails in place to make sure that no one is going in and duplicating that same exact project as well. And while we're waiting for that to load, essentially it's tying up all of those assets within control centers within that project and rolling it up into the portfolio level dashboards and reports so that we don't have to go in and one by one add every single new project into those portfolio level reports as well. All right, and within that, Control Center was able to spin up that project within a matter of about 60 seconds there with all of those assets without having to spend extra time, duplicating efforts or data entry. All of these reports and metrics were also automatically populated into the portfolio level reports as well. And this just allows us to begin executing right away. One last important call out with Control Center as well here is something called global updates. So we can leverage something called global updates, which will allow you to make changes across all of your active projects. So, kind of speaking to consistency and standardizing the process. So we can add anything as far as adding a new column, maybe modifying an existing column, adding new profile data, finding or replacing text or formulas even within cells, or updating reports and dashboards. So to give an example, let's say that we need to add a column to, all of your project plans. Instead of manually going into each of those project plans and adding a column, you'll be able to deploy that change across all of your projects through global updates. So it's a huge time saver for a lot of our customers there. All right, so now that we've taken a look at Control Center and how that works and how it provisions our projects, we're going to go take a look at our executive portfolio dashboard. So that's going to be our portfolio reporting domain where I, as a leader or someone who needs to understand the entire scope of our organization's work, can go into and get that bird's eye view. All right, so right now we're looking at that portfolio dashboard. And for me as a leader, it's really important that I'm able to go in here and get that real-time visibility across all of our projects. So when I come in here every morning, for example, I can get visibility into immediately our at-risk projects, where I can drill down into that and see what they are, maybe who they're led by, and who I need to contact to address those bottlenecks. I can also see information such as project status, project spend, health across our different kinds of departments to really ensure fast and accurate decision making because all of this information is automatically rolled up per project through Control Center. So I can really trust what I'm seeing here because we've minimized that risk of human error and eliminated the need for someone to, again, add these new projects one by one here into the reports on an ongoing basis. So every time that you provision a brand new project in Control Center, it's going to automatically apply those project data sets into this portfolio dashboard metrics. I can also look at the dashboard and quickly see what conversations I need to have with other leaders. So, for example, we can see if a department is going over budget on their projects, and that can really prompt me to talk to leaders, like, for example, in the finance department, to see why that may be the case. So this kind of visibility will help us just make sure that we're addressing any kind of potential problems proactively before they cause any kind of impact. And I do want to call out again that you're not alone in the process of building out these different kinds of views and dashboards. We'll have our team really help you and understand exactly what you would need to see in a dashboard like this, and then help build that out for you. And since we're landing on a report here that's kind of based around strategic goals, so these projects in this report are organized by our strategic goals. We'll now move into our final section of the demonstration and take a look at our strategic planning domain and then how this kind of visibility will help us with strategic decision making and long-term planning. All right, and I'll do one last check-in here before I move into our final chapter. Alan, any questions outside of the chat that we need to address?
Nope, I think we may just go a little bit deeper into resource management at the end of our hour.
Absolutely, perfect. Yeah, and we have some time there, so we'll go ahead and do that. All right, so that leads us to strategic planning here. So with our strategic planning dashboard, we have this view that makes it just really easy for us to take stock of projects that are proposed and then those that are already happening, just so we can plan better for any kind of upcoming work as well. So if I think about strategic planning as something that's more on a quarterly or annual basis, I want to be able to surface information to make decisions about what additional work we're going to take on. But I also might want to look at existing performance as well. So let's say that, for example, we're at a quarterly or annual planning event. And as we determined earlier, there's an opportunity to do more projects for, let's say, this strategic goal, service delivery, because we don't have as many in this category and we may want to balance out that portfolio. And it's important to look at that pipeline to see what we have incoming, but it's also important to look at how those active projects in the category are performing as well. So should we be looking at the proposed budget versus the relative budget so we can make those realistic decisions about what we can take on? Next, we would also want to take a look at maybe what departments are those levels of work going to impact. So, if we're really impacting our IT team, our IT department, should we be also giving them anything more? So all in all, as a portfolio leader, this is going to help me feel good about what projects we're taking on. It can also help inform us around what work might make sense to sunset and reallocate resources to something that is more realistic or is going to give us a higher impact there. So really allowing you to essentially see all those different conversations that you're able to start taking on and be confident about what of those projects that you're choosing to take on. All right, and I'll do a quick recap here. So we're streamlining our intake process with this process, and then we're prioritizing those projects that's actually then based by data or backed by data. And then we're ensuring that we have the people and the resources to take that work on. And we're able to execute on that work and streamline that process for actually kicking off that work, ultimately giving you that portfolio level reporting and strategic planning to ensure that your business is growing and it is scaling, and ensuring that we're always being proactive on any of those risks and issues that may rise up. All right, and that kind of concludes the end of our demonstration here. I'll move us into Q&A, and then we can kind of dive deeper into that resource management piece that we were talking about. All right. Alan, you mentioned we're diving a little bit deeper into resource management there.
Yeah, so Karen Saito's asked a couple of questions throughout the duration of this demonstration. I'm gonna bring a couple of them up for the audience to just glean some insights into. So one of the quick answers I wanted to bring up. So the question was, does the leadership team need to have a license in order to view dashboards? The answer is absolutely not. However, it is important to note that if you are all going down the path of leveraging our resource management module, you do have the ability to, of course, calculate analytics and create analytic reports within resource management. You then can take those reports and actually embed them into Smartsheet dashboards. If your leadership shared to a Smartsheet dashboard that has those analytic insights, you will not be able to actually see the analytical insights from resource management unless you have a resource management license. So that's important to note. However, if you just created a dashboard that has analytics surfaced from your underlying data sets within Smartsheet, they by no means need to have a license to view that. So the specifics on resource management I wanted to dive into. So Karen asked first, she said, is team capacity based off of number of hours available? And so the short answer is yes. Essentially what happens within our resource management module is you in the back end have the ability to set the number of hours that a individual works within a given day. Usually the standard is 8, right? And so when you are, and Miriam, if you want to go to the capacity view really quickly within resource
Exactly.
management.
Good call out there.
So when we look at the capacity view, that is essentially a calculation showing you the team's total available hours, right? So if you look at each individual team member, so if you have 10 team members, that's 80 hours that's available in a given day, right? And so that's of course then aggregated to a given month. And if you have over 80 hours, that's what's going to drive this to turn red. So hopefully that gives you more insight, Karen, into like how this given capacity view is calculated on a month by month basis. Now from there, what I wanted to go into is how does that then come in via Smartsheet? And so, Miriam, if you want to dive into just one of your individual projects within
Yeah.
resource, that'd be perfect.
Within
Well, this works too. We can stay here. So essentially what's happening, every single one of these, you'll see these resource allocation bars, right? Each bar you can imagine as a record that it's synchronized to within a sheet within your Smartsheet environment, right? And so when we synchronize our data set from Smartsheet to flow into resource management, that's actually done by leveraging allocation percentage. And so if you have let's say a task within Smartsheet that is 50% allocation, then what that basically is doing is that is taking, you can imagine that as 4 hours a day over the duration of that task, and it's creating that bar within resource management, right? And so if we, as you can see here in this example, Tamika was assigned 100% allocation from 5/13/2024 to 5/29/2024. And that's basically saying that she is spending 8 hours a day working on design approvals over that duration of time. Hopefully design approvals don't actually take 8 hours a day over a duration of how many days in this case scenario, but at least that gives everyone the understanding of how that like how that data flows from Smartsheet into resource management. So Karen, hopefully that's helpful and gives you more context into the answers that I typed up. Let me know if there's any follow-up in that regard.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for addressing that, Alan. We have 15 minutes left, so I'll leave this Q&A up in case other questions kind of flow in. And in the meantime, as there are potentially additional questions that are going to flow in for us, we would love to have your feedback on today's session and how it was valuable to you. We're always, trying to make these better. So feel free to use this QR code on the screen. We'll contact you to answer some additional questions, but we'll leave this up for a couple of more minutes there to see if anything else also comes through.
Karen just asked, could you please show the high-level dashboard again of the project portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to make sure I heard you correctly, showing that bird's eye view with the portfolio reporting dashboard, is that correct?
Yep, this is what she's looking.
Perfect. So I'll just kind of scroll through again. So these are a series of different kinds of reports, metrics, and widgets that we pulled into this high-level dashboard. And again, I wanted to call out that this is completely unique and customized to what exactly your organization needs to see. So what we're seeing here is more of a generic standpoint, so we can kind of address organizations across different kinds of departments, finance, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to building out a dashboard like this for your organization, The way that it would work is we would have that kind of conversation around what is important to you, what are your priorities to see, what are some things that when you get into this dashboard, you really need to understand right off the bat to move your work forward as efficiently as possible. So you definitely wouldn't be alone in this process. And speaking to, the customized capabilities of those dashboards, there's a world where you would want to add additional widgets or kind of create your own additional dashboards there. Just want to show that it's really simple to add in a report, maybe add in some images, charts and metrics based on your sheets within this dashboard. It kind of acts like a drag and drop mentality. So you can kind of move different kinds of widgets wherever you want within this view here.
So Karen just asks, she'd like to see the breakdown of 38 projects on a timeline. How do you show resource allocation over time? So I would take a two-pronged approach to this, Karen. First of all, like the first part of your question, showing the breakdown of 38 projects on a timeline. The first part of it is like what's actually happening essentially in that timeline view of like what are the major milestones that are happening within that project that we want to view on a high level that aren't necessarily resource focused, right? In that regard, what we would use, we do have the best tool we have for that is a premium application called Calendar App. Miriam, do we have that showcased here? Great. So
You.
this is a great example. However, so where Miriam's calendar app shows you, if you look on the left-hand side, we have kind of everything bucketed by in progress and then priority, right? However, this can also then be broken first down by a project and then the major milestones within that project. And so essentially what you're seeing here is a timeline view of the major milestones that would be happening bucketed by each individual project. So that's just a great way to give high-level executive visibility into what's actually happening across the broad swaths of each of our projects, right? The second part of that is then how do you show resources that are working towards a project over time? Miriam, can you go back to resource management for me?
Absolutely.
Perfect. And so we showcase predominantly the individual or the team member schedule overview here. However, there is another toggle. If you want to go click on the drop down over to the left and open up projects, we do actually have a project view here as well. So it's basically flipping where the swim lanes before were each by individual resource. Now what we're seeing is essentially the timelines of these projects. And then if you want to go ahead and click, see where it says Project Onyx, go ahead and click and drop down. So it's actually, if you scroll over, this is very hard to see. That doesn't seem to have any tasks. So go and find one that does. Go ahead and open all of them. There you
Okay.
go. So it shows you essentially the tasks that the resources are working on towards that project. So those are the two different views you have from a resource side. So hopefully that helps, Karen, and it gives you a comprehensive answer as far as the two different sides of the equation. One is like just timeline and milestone visibility, and then the other is actually the resource timeline per se. Tasks by team rather than individual resource. Unfortunately, no. What you can do is you can create metadata tags for given teams in the back end of resource management, and then you can filter by that given team. However, the way that our resource management module works does not necessarily, like you don't have the ability to assign a team within Smartsheet, right? What you can do, I often in my previous role as implementation manager and consulting, I've seen some instances where you create essentially email addresses for those given teams, and then you're assigning those to the entire team within Smartsheet. So essentially, if we go back to that task example where Miriam was showing the task and you want to assign that task to a team, that is doable. However, it doesn't work well with the way that the platform is set up. Karen, if you had, and Karen, thanks for all the great questions. I'm sure that it's helping others get insight that is valuable to them as well. If you want to have a deeper dive conversation into the mechanics of how this solution is set up and how data flows from Smartsheet into resource management, and then how that, of course, is broken down within the views you're seeing here in front of you, I would reach out to your account executive, and they can set up a technical call if necessary.
Awesome. Thanks for answering those, Alan. I'll just keep us on the screen for one more minute here in case another question flows in, just so we're already on the screen, and then I'll move us back into the slides. All right, with that, I'll move us into the slides here. If there's no other questions coming in, just want to thank you again on behalf of the team here at Smartsheet. Thank you so much for your time. I definitely hope that you took something away from the session today. And as Alan mentioned, if there are any additional questions, definitely please feel free to reach out to your Smartsheet contact to learn more. If there are no other questions, we can conclude that demonstration there. Alan, anything else coming in?
I would just appreciate everyone's time. I hope you're leaving satiated and not hungry for more information.
Perfect. All right. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your Tuesday and the rest of your week as well.
Take care, all.
Bye, everyone.